Airport staff tried to stop a Tomb Guard escort. What happened next silenced the crowd. The Monday rush at Concourse C sounded like 100 plans arguing. Roller bags rattled. Coffee lines hissed. The departures board blinked like a nervous eye. Gate C18 was a wedge of fluorescent light impatience, staffed by people who had learned to smile even when the printer did not. Alyssa Tran, the lead agent, had already solved 3 seat swaps and a stroller that insisted on folding into the shape of regret. She checked her watch. 08:27. Boarding in 8 minutes. She straightened her blazer, lifted the mic, and prepared to herd. That's when she saw him, moving down the concourse in a slow, exact line that didn't match the airport's frantic grammar. He wore the dress blues of a sentinel of the tomb of the unknown soldier, the honor badge a matte wreath on his chest. His shoes were mirror black. His face was the stillness you only see on guard posts and in very old churches. At his left, a woman in a navy dress clutched a small triangular case, a neatly folded flag. Beside her, a boy of about 10, hair too carefully combed for a Monday, held a wreath so precisely his fingers had gone white. Between them, riding the cadence like it had been born to it, patted a sable military working dog, muzzle gray at the edges, vest patched with one blunt word: retired. The sentinel's right hand stayed curled at his trouser seam, the way the training demanded. He wasn't marching the rigid 21 steps of Arlington, not here. But every line in his body said post. The crowd felt it before they saw it. A path opened the way water opens around a rock. Alyssa's training. No processions through the jet bridge. No filming on the ramp without clearance. No animals past the podium without forms. Rose like a checklist in her throat. The pilot of the flight to Dallas, Captain Ryan Greeley, stepped to the door and glanced down the concourse. He went very still, too. The sentinel stopped at the gate and spoke in a voice that carried without trying. "Ma'am," he said to Alyssa, "we're here for Sergeant Michael Carter. We are escorting his mother and brother to the plane. I request permission to approach the jet bridge and the ramp for a dignified transfer." Alyssa's mouth made the shape of, "I wish I'd had 5 minutes notice." Her hands found her rule book, even as her heart found the flag in the woman's arms. We don't usually," she began, feeling other eyes on her. "I need operations to clear the ramp access, and TSA needs—" The sentinel did not move. He didn't argue. He waited, the way marble waits for the sun. The dog sat at his heel, leaned into the boy, and looked up as if checking the room's pulse. At the counter, Mr. Alvarez, a Vietnam vet who wore his U.S. Army cap to every flight out of habit and a little bit of defiance, removed it and held it to his chest. A family at C-16 went quiet. The PA from a nearby kiosk shut itself off mid-promo, and someone in the speaker closet forgot to turn it back on. "Ops to C-18, Alyssa said into her radio, trying to keep the wobble out of her voice. "I need a supervisor, and I need ramp clearance for a dignified escort. I have a tomb guard on site." Static. Then, "Copy C-18. Stand by." The boy shifted the wreath in his small hands. The woman in the navy dress, Angela Carter, was breathing on purpose the way people do when they have learned if they stop, they will not start again. She kept her fingers on the flag's glass as if it were a lifeline. The dog glanced at her and then back at the sentinel as if confirming everyone still had their jobs. A TSA officer approached, eyebrows knitting. "Sir, we can't allow—" "Officer," Captain Greeley said gently, stepping into the conversation, "we're going to make the right call today." Alyssa's radio clicked. "C-18 Ops. You're clear for a ramp escort. Ground has halted tugs on taxiway Bravo for 5 minutes. Station manager en route. TSA advised. Proceed at your discretion." She exhaled so quietly no one noticed. She stepped out from behind the podium, stood up straight the way her father had taught her at his citizenship ceremony years ago, and addressed the gate. Not with an announcement voice, but with the kind you use in rooms that remember. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "we have the honor of assisting a Gold Star family today. Sergeant Michael Carter is coming home on this flight. His mother and brother will board now with an escort from the tomb of the unknown soldier. We will hold boarding. I ask that you remain silent as they pass." No one argued about their connections. No one asked about overhead space. The crowd made room. A baby fussed, and then inexplicably calmed. Somewhere down the concourse, a janitor turned off his radio without being told. The sentinel nodded once to Alyssa, a grateful acknowledgement, not permission, and turned to the family. He placed his white-gloved hand just behind Angela's elbow, the guidance so gentle it could have been a thought. The boy held the wreath like a champion. The dog rose, touched his nose to the flag case, and fell into step. They moved together toward the jet bridge door. A ramp agent with grease on his sleeve and a lump in his throat swiped his badge and pulled it open. The cool air of the tarmac lifted the hem of Angela's dress. On the ramp below, a small ground crew had lined themselves along the painted line without anyone telling them. Baggage handlers, fuelers, a woman in a neon vest from catering with cinnamon rolls still warm in her truck. They all stood. Captain Greeley stepped to the top of the stairs inside the plane and saluted. The first officer stood at his shoulder. A flight attendant placed a small blue cloth over the jump seat, as if the seat itself wanted to stop being a seat and learn how to be a pew. Halfway down the jet bridge, the boy's arms started to shake. The dog leaned his shoulder into the boy's leg, the small, solid anchor that says we can stand here. The sentinel adjusted his pace, shifted a fraction to block the wind, and counted 3 silent beats the way guards do when a world needs a reset. Angela pressed her palm to the flag. Her knuckles were white. Her eyes were steady. At the threshold of the plane, the sentinel turned to Angela. "Mrs. Carter," he said, quiet enough to make everyone lean in without realizing, "when you are ready." She nodded. The boy took a breath that will be the reference breath for the rest of his life. They stepped in. The cabin, full of travelers who had been mid-text and mid-complaint moments ago, sat frozen as if the air had thickened. A man in 4C, a businessman whose suit had forgotten to be kind, stood up and removed his tie, folded it into his seat-back pocket, and put a hand flat over his heart like he'd been waiting for an excuse to remember how. A college kid in 22A, who'd spent the morning sending memes to the group chat, stood because everyone else did and then stayed standing because he wanted to. A woman in 7D clasped her rosary without moving her lips. From the forward galley, taps did not play. No one could make a trumpet appear. Instead, a flight attendant with R. McLean on her name tag lifted the interphone and said, "Out of respect, we will keep the cabin silent for 1 minute." She clicked it off. The silence flooded in. The sentinel faced down the aisle and came to attention. He raised his right hand in a slow salute, the arc of it a lesson. The boy, not knowing the regulations and not needing to, copied him with his free hand. Angela bowed her head. The dog lay sphinx still at their feet and did not move. At the back of the plane, a little girl whose father had taught her that being quiet could be kindness, pressed her face to the window and watched the ramp crew, all standing in a line, caps off, hands still. One of them, the biggest, had tears in his beard. When the minute passed, the sentinel lowered his hand. He turned to Angela. His voice did not shake. "I will remain with you until we land." "Thank you," she whispered, and the words were so small and true they felt like a prayer. They sat, front row, not for status, but because proximity matters when grief needs a hand. The dog curled at the boy's sneakers, pressed his chin to the toe, and sighed the sigh of jobs taken seriously. Back at the gate, Alyssa blinked hard and lifted the mic with both hands because one wasn't enough. "We will begin boarding after the first officer gives the word," she said. "Thank you for your patience." Her voice did not betray how her chest felt, both empty and full. A man at the counter leaned in. "My connection," he started, out of habit more than malice, and then he looked down the jet bridge, looked at the flag, looked at the dog, and stopped. "Never mind," he said. "It can wait." At the last second before they closed the door, an elderly woman in a cardigan, the exact color of a hospital blanket, appeared at the gate on a motorized cart, breathless. "I'm his grandmother," she told Alyssa, words tripping. "They told me to come to C-18. I'm not fast." Alyssa keyed the radio. "Hold," she said. She walked the woman down herself. The sentinel stood the moment he saw her. The boy turned and folded himself into her lap in a tangle that somehow made room for the dog. The grandmother pressed her cheek to the boy's hair and whispered something that made his shoulders drop just a little. The plane pushed back. The crowd at the window watched a tug pause at the end of the line and 2 wing walkers stand still and tall, batons at their sides like candles. At cruising altitude, the sentinel did not sleep. He does not sleep in public, and also this was not a day for it. The boy dozed with his hand knotted in the dog's vest. Angela stared at the flag and not through it, present unbearably, the way the brave are when there is no one else to do the job. Somewhere over Tennessee, the flight attendant knelt in the aisle and asked if she could bring water. The sentinel thanked her with a nod that meant you did your job perfectly. When they landed, the pilot asked the cabin to remain seated. No one groaned. At the door, two soldiers in dress uniforms waited with a detail. The ground crew had arranged a flag line with orange wands crossed in a makeshift arch because you use what you have to make ceremony when the world needs one. As the family stepped into the jet bridge, a man at 4C, the businessman who had taken off his tie, reached into his seat back and pulled it out again. He looked at it, looked at the boy, and offered it with a small, helpless laugh. "It's the only thing I have," he said. The boy accepted it with solemnity. He would not keep it. He would place it in a drawer with a program and a pin and forget about it until one day, years from now, when he would find it and cry in a kitchen for reasons his children would not understand. Back at C-18, the station manager printed a memo. No one would file properly, but everyone would remember. When a family carries a flag, the airport makes room. When a sentinel asks, we say yes. When a dog lays down at a child's feet, we give them time. Weeks later, a package arrived at the station office. A photograph, black and white, of a tomb guard standing in a jet bridge, saluting a flag under fluorescent light. The dog lay at his boots, the boy's profile blurred with motion. On the back, a note in neat handwriting. "Thank you for letting duty travel the way it needed to. Angela, Carter, and Jacob, and Ranger, who now sleeps under Jacob's bed." Sometimes the thing that silences a crowd isn't a performance. It's permission, granted at a gate podium, to be solemn in a place built for hurry. Airport staff tried to stop a tomb guard escort because rules keep planes on time. Then the rules made room for honor, and a concourse learned how to be a sanctuary for 5 perfect minutes. If this story made you stand a little straighter, like and share it. Subscribe to Next Kindness, where the next thing that happens is grace.